Just as political turmoil in Nigeria tore apart Faith's family, the winds of change were sweeping through Vietnam, halfway around the world. For Andrew Lam, the son of a legendary South Vietnamese general, any semblance of home was devastated by the fall of Saigon in 1975. As a young refugee, Andrew found himself lost in America, only to find his voice as one of the country's leading Vietnamese American writers. Andrew is a part of this new wave, a generation removed from the tumult of the Vietnam War, but still grappling with their relationship to home, whether they think of it as Saigon or San Jose. Andrew has returned to Vietnam many times as a journalist, and each time he ventures to the house where he was born. He stands outside the gates of the house, but he could never bring himself to step inside until now.
There was someone who looked at my face and he said, you know, yours is not a Vietnamese face. And I say, why not? And he say, because it's a face that did not know suffering. And I say, I see. And he say, if I had escaped and gone to the United States like you did, I would have transformed myself too. During the war, we were so together, you know, live and die together. There was no sense of separation. But in America, our ambitions, our dreams, our sadness were particular and different from one another. And in fact, we became isolated from one another. So, in fact, I had no place in the American imagination when I first came to the United States in 1975. And that was also the cause of my frustration for years. And perhaps it's also part of the reason why I write, is to explain what had happened from a point of view of someone who was forced out of his homeland and had to readjust to a new way of life. The first home in America was my aunt's apartment in Daly City. Everybody was living everywhere, you know, under the dining table. And there was a certain smell that I always remember too, because there was fish sauce, there was incense, there's grandmothers praying, you know, and then there's a TV always on because the kids would not want to listen to the parents argue, so we watch TV. My father didn't talk at all. He just barricaded himself in the room. Well, my father was a general during the Vietnam War. He fought for the side of the South Vietnamese Army. When I was a child, the army uniform my father wore was the most familiar thing because I rarely saw him in civilian clothes. It's a little faded, 30 years since, but that's his first name. And this is the insignia for being part of the airborne. As a child, I remember every time he came home, you know, his uniform would have the smell of dirt, gunpowder, cigarettes, and sweat. Vietnam divided in two in 1954. The southern part was supported by the United States, and the north was under communist rule by Ho Chi Minh. The north wanted to reunite the country. quite a lot of people who knew that they would be persecuted if they stay in North Vietnam left. My father, having been defeated in that war, I don't think he has ever overcome that experience. When we first came to the United States, we were in poverty. My father, after a year of living in deep depression, decided to pick himself up and started working. And so he found a job with Bank of America, and then he went to night school to get his MBA. And within 5 years, he got an executive position and brought us out of poverty and bought our first house and took us to Disneyland and so on. But even so, I think there was a deep sadness within my family because it was, in a way, irretrievable what we had lost.
I saw him on an interview. It was the first time that I saw my uncle in an interview, because he doesn't usually talk a lot. And so I complimented him, and since then I'm his favorite niece. I'm in with him.
And she's my favorite because she likes my book.
You have to say that again.
I spent 25 years in the Vietnamese army, so the army is my raison d'être. But I still long to go back to Vietnam and retire in Vietnam and maybe eventually die in Vietnam, because I think the Vietnamese communist regime and Chinese communist regime also eventually will collapse. It's a question of time, not if, but when. So I hope I can live to that day to come back to a free Vietnam.
He will live and die with the memory of the war as the defining moment of his life. I think for me, I'm hoping to move beyond it to create something very